So I feel like we're going to speak in sort of generalities about this and sort of make grand statements about the Lightning are the better team, the Bruins aren't there, and it's true. I think when you lose 4-1 twice in 3 years to the same team, you're not at that team's level. They're a bad matchup for you. But also, I mean, with this series, what's kind of incredible is that you had 2 overtime games, and I think you know as well as I do, overtime in the Stanley Cup playoffs is often about a break, a bounce, a screen, a deflection, any sort of, luck, which I think teams do create, but it's still luck. So I think the fact that they were in overtime in 2 of those games does make them closer than I think all of us are going to conceptualize. We're all going to say over the next few months, like, oh, they're just not on Tampa's level. They're not as far as we're going to make them out to be. That's what I think.
To me, you did not lose this series in this series. The Bruins lost this series in February. They lost this series at the trade deadline. You knew you were going to play the Lightning at some point. Even in the normal postseason format, it was a given you were going to play Tampa. You were going to get past the first round. The Lightning were going to get past the first round. You were going to play each other in the second round for the second time in 3 years. And you didn't kind of create that arms race. We normally see teams, when you're, Red Sox and Yankees competing against each other for signing people. There really wasn't a lot of that. I mean, the Bruins lost out on Blake Coleman. And then, they go out and get Andre Kasha to dump David Backes' salary. And then they go out and get Nick Ritchie. Whereas the Lightning go out and they get Barclay Goodrow, who they kind of overpaid for. They get Coleman. They also signed Bogosian, which was a very good depth defensive signing. And they solidify their third line. You don't. And you also get a second-line right winger who can't score. So the Bruins at this deadline, we will look back on, they got more of what they already had. Big lugs who don't really contribute a lot, Nick Ritchie, and Andre Kasha, who is great, skilled, fits well next to Krejci, but can't score a goal to save his own life. So they did not acquire anything new per se. I mean, Kasha was better on Krejci's right side, but you did not match up to Tampa's additions at the trade deadline. Tampa did more, and they got rewarded for it.
Yeah, I have to, not to be a retrospective criticizer, but I really have to question the talent assessment of Andre Kasha, because the way I put it is David Krejci, we know, is an absolute wizard. His vision on the ice is unbelievable. So Kasha had all these attempts in the playoffs, all these great chances, and people are saying, wow, he's playing great. He's just got to finish. It's like, well, is he? Because David Krejci turned Milan Lucic into a 30-goal scorer. Like, that's the type of power Krejci wields with that stick, and Kasha had 0 goals as a Bruin. So certainly not what they were looking for there. I know they were looking to get better 5-on-5. Not the guy to do it, I take it. And then, the Ritchie thing, it's funny because last year, remember in the whole playoffs, it was like, they need toughness. They need toughness. Dress David Backes. And it's like, yeah, David Backes is tough as hell, but he's not like a 6'4", 230-pound bruising forward who can he'll literally die on the ice if you ask him to. So, like, all respect to David Backes' toughness, he's just not the physical player that you need in a playoff series to dump it in and pound the defenseman. And the Bruins have not had that size now. And the weirdest thing, I think, to me, 2 years you come away, you lose series where the other team was bigger than the Bruins, was heavier than the Bruins, was more physically imposing than the Bruins. Coincidentally, both times Pat Maroon was laughing in their faces the entire time. But that's not the Bruins we grew up on. That's not the Bruins that have been established for decades. The big bad Bruins for 2 years in a row, they were kind of like the 2011 Canucks, just kind of getting pushed around. This year was probably less so, but still they weren't more physical than a team wearing like a soft baby blue jersey with a lightning bolt on it. And that's a strange sight to see. So, I mean, they tried it with Nick Ritchie, but he doesn't know how to do it, as evidenced by his hit in Game 4, despite Bruce Cassidy's objections. So definitely you can see what they were going for there, but I think they swung too far in the other way with being slow and big and heavy. They wanted to go small and skilled. I think they went maybe a little too far in that direction where they've gotten out physical, to use a terrible sports cliche, 2 years in a row.
Well, the thing is, again, in this series, there were a few games where they out-hit Tampa. But it doesn't matter. Okay, the hit's fine. So be it. But the issue is you can't get to the front of the net. Like, part of being a big like, the Bruins need to be more physical. Okay, so let's hit everything that moves. Okay, fine. But that means you don't have the puck. And that also means that it didn't do anything. You lost 4-1. And on top of that, main part of that physical thing is you got to find a way to the front of the net. And against that Tampa blue line where you have big guys like Hedman, Sergachev, Shattenkirk, McDonough, Bogosian, Cernak, these are big dudes. It's not Grzelcyk and Krug. Nothing against them. But it's easier to get to the front of the net against guys like that than it is against the Tampa's decor. So the issue really is you need guys big enough to get to the front of the net. And again, Nick Ritchie's a big dude who can knock some guys around. He chases the play, but he's not getting to the front of the net. And I think that's something they need to focus on is you need to find people who can get to the front of the net, who can bring the puck into those high danger areas. They couldn't do it against Tampa.
Yeah, and I think they've become for 2 years now just wholly dependent on the power play, which is great when you get your penalties. But as you saw, I think Bruce Cassidy's post games this series was kind of desperation because he was working the refs after a 7-1 loss is an unprecedented move, I believe, in the history of any sport, really. Obviously, when the linesman is in the way of your guy playing defense, that's one thing. But for the most part, I found that to just be. I don't blame him for trying it because it worked for Berube last year, but it's a team that is wholly dependent on scoring on the man advantage because 5-on-5, they are what they are. I mean, Pasternak will pot one every now and then, or Marchand will make an incredible play. That line can score 5-on-5, but we saw Krejci working without wingers all year was a problem. Poor Charlie Coyle. I think Charlie Coyle's an incredible ice hockey centerman. It's just sad that he's had to work. I mean, and again, I'm not to completely disrespect these guys, but to go out there in a playoff game with Nick Ritchie or Anders Bjork or Studnicka, who I thought was probably the best of the bunch, which isn't saying much in the playoffs, it's kind of a waste of Coyle. Like, you're almost better off putting him on Krejci's wing and just rolling two lines and seeing what happens. So the team was too dependent on that, I think, for 2 years. And you're not in control of penalties. You're not in control of the other team's discipline. You're not in control of what's called and what's not called. And then you kind of have to – you put that pressure on yourself to be perfect. So to get to your point about getting the front of the net, absolutely. Vasilevsky was good in this series, but, I mean, the Bruins really they stretched the boundaries of the theory that there's no such thing as a bad shot in their Game 5 loss because everything was from distance. Everything was seen. Everything was clean. You might sneak one through in that situation, but Vasilevsky was just solid there, and they never made him work too hard. And when they did, they scored. So is that size, though, or is it coaching and strategy? Because to me, one of the best guys in this run, in this Bruins era of getting in front of the net was Mark Recchi, who at that point was 5'5", couldn't skate, had no neck whatsoever, but he was willing to endure. No neck. It was just all the years of getting beaten down in the NHL. But he would plant himself in front of that net at 40, 41, 42, take the abuse that comes with it, and he taught those guys a lot, being on Bergeron and Marchand's line, he taught those guys a lot about toughness in the NHL, I think, and that's a big reason why that team won a Stanley Cup, the leadership that showed. And after that, in the next iteration or generation of this Bruins run, the best guy at standing in front of the net and during that punishment was Louis Eriksson, who's a guy who's not known for being tough or strong or big. He would have absorbed the abuse in front of the net. He would get beaten up, but he would stand there and he would tip shots and he would screen goalies. And I think that is strategy, effort, willingness, more so than size. I mean, it's great when you have a guy that can plant himself there, but if you have someone who's willing to do it, it can make a huge difference. And that's not really how those top two lines are built. The third and fourth line, I don't really know how they're built. And that's I think the end result is not getting what you need in front.
I also think a part of it is, a good Stanley Cup team, a team that makes a real run, has 4 set lines that you can rely on. And I felt the Bruins never really had their third line intact. As we said, Nick Ritchie, Anders Bjork, Jack Studnicka, Sean Corrali just kind of rotated through. Look at what Coyle did last offseason. And this goes back to the trade deadline acquisitions. Johansson stuck, Coyle stuck, put him with Heinen. That was a set third line, and they were great, especially in those first 2 rounds, and especially against Columbus. Huge reasons why they won. Again, that's secondary scoring, something the Bruins almost had none of against the Lightning. And again, the Lightning are the better. I think this is one of the myths that went around with this team during the year was they won the President's Trophy, and people thought that automatically made them the best team in hockey, on paper as well. They weren't. I mean, the Lightning were better than you from the start, in my opinion.
I mean, the Lightning did win 3 or 4, so
they did. That's the other thing. Like, and just like on paper, I mean, you look at that roster. You know, I mean, every part. I mean, you have the first line: Kucherov, Palat, and Braden Point, who I think might have been the best player in this series. Second line, you got Alex Killorn, Tyler Johnson, Anthony Cirelli, who is a lot of people compare to Bergeron. And you have that third line, and that in the fourth line, Pat Maroon laughing in your face for a second straight year can't be fun. But I think there were a lot of things that went wrong for the Bruins in this series. But again, to me, it goes back to the deadline. You just did not do enough back then. So,
but do you think? And I agree with you there. But do you think? I mean, Blake Coleman, obviously, I think he had 2 goals in what game? The 7-goal game. Was Coleman the difference, or was Goodrow the difference? I don't. Maybe, I don't know.
That third, having that set third line that's able to pin the opposition in their own zone for large strength at times. The Lightning put that line up against the Bergeron line and really helped neutralize them the entire series 5-on-5. So to me, that's absolutely a line that makes a difference. Now, I don't know how they work with the Bruins. I don't know if the Bruins are going to give up. They didn't have 2 firsts to give up. I don't know if they're giving up a first to San Jose for Barclay Goodrow. Like, that's not worth a first-round pick. But there were other people out there. I mean, there was Coleman. There was Kreider, even though that probably might not have happened. I mean, if you go back to it, there were other things.
Kreider ended up getting like $79 million from the Rangers for the next 50 years, I think.
They gave him a fat new deal. So, But again, Coyle wasn't on the radar to get traded at last deadline. I mean, the Bruins found a way to get him. Yeah. So there were ways they maybe could have
no doubt. And I think
deal.
To your point, the effect, the wearing down of that top line, Pasternak in double overtime couldn't stay on his skates in Game 5.
Pasternak looked hurt this series.
I don't know if it's the conditioning or the offseason or missing the 2 weeks or whatever it was in the ramp up. He should have been similar to his teammates at the point of the 5th game of the second round, but he couldn't stay on his skates in double overtime. He was dead. You saw Cassidy trying to sort of manage it and juggle the lines. The commentators were giving him credit for juggling the lines. I think Pasternak needed rest. So whether that was him or whether that was the Lightning wearing him down, the end result was a dead tired Pasternak in double overtime with the season on the line. And when you kind of only rely on your top line to score, that's a bad recipe.
That's not a great recipe for success. It's also what happens when you go against Victor Hedman every shift. Victor Hedman,
how about
obviously dominant.
Right before, like probably 3 minutes before the game-winning goal, when Hedman just walked in, just like with a red carpet laid out to the net, it was like, holy crap. I don't know how. I mean, all Halak really had to do was hold his ground, but it still was like it looked like the end of a movie where like the bad guy's about to just like pull the trigger on the protagonist there. Like it was like slow motion. I'm surprised Hedman didn't score there. So then I wasn't surprised when he did score, whatever it was, 3 minutes later.
Yes, it was Jack Studnicka's guy, and Jack Studnicka kind of just stood in the slot trying to eliminate the pass, and it's like, so you're just going to let him get an open shot, uncontested, right to Halak.
Victor Hedman. It's Victor Hedman right there. Step out maybe. But yeah.
Let him go to the net. Let him go to the net.
Halak was pretty good. Got to give him credit for that.
Halak was great in Game 5. And again, here's the thing. I don't know if, looking back now at the series, I don't know if it was ever realistic to think that Halak was going to be able to pull out 4 games similar to Games 5 and Game 1 to beat the Lightning. I mean, there were too many soft goals in there. But again, there's no scoring.
Look at Rask's history versus the Lightning. It's not like he's been good against them. So I honestly don't know. Obviously, the bad goals were the bad goals. We understand that. And the 7-1 loss was a disaster. But when you look at this and you say, how far would they have made it with Tuukka? Tuukka's history versus Tampa isn't exactly glowing. You'd rather have him than not have him. But I don't know that ultimately this series ends differently. Well, and even if that's in May,
Well, see, I think if this series happened in May, I think Rask gives you a better chance than Halak does. I think now, if Rask was still there with 1 foot out the door and 1 foot in, I think then Halak does give you the better chance. I mean, that's something a lot of people are saying. I'd rather have Halak all in than Rask kind of 50-50 in.
What if Rask shows up to Toronto and is psychotic, locked in the entire time?
Just like laser focused?
Are they getting by Tampa?
I don't know if you're getting by Tampa, but I think there's a better chance. Now, however, the one thing is, I don't think Rask lets in those soft goals, but the high danger chances that Halak is somehow very good at, I don't know if Rask makes those saves.
I agree.
But I do think you
like
are
even
more competitive.
Early in Game 5, I feel like Tampa had like 3 shots from the goal mouth that
They did.
were like just goals. And if Tuukka's there, those are probably goals.
Yes,
I mean, it's unpredictable, obviously, but
you also have to look at it like I don't think Game 3 is as bad as it is. I don't know if the breakaway goal gets through Rask's legs in Game 2. Like, there's so many little soft goals.
I mean, it's a different game.
It's so tough to tell. It's tough to tell, but exactly. But I do think that I do think that they would have had a better shot with Raskin. Now, I do want to kind of discuss what the future of this core is. So after Game 5, obviously, Doc Emmerich gives this long-winded thing about Chara leaving. I don't know if he says that when not knowing something. I think Doc Emmerich knows something. I do. I don't know. You don't just go on a diatribe like that and have the guy come back the next year, you know?
Yeah, and Keith Jones said something on the Krejci goal where they showed the replay. He's like, Zdeno Chara here, not wanting his Bruins career to come to an end. But at the same time, it's not like they're in the bubble, with these guys. That would make me believe they knew a little bit more than they were letting on. But definitely Emmerich's turn of focus in the handshake line to Chara immediately. Like, I watched the Sportsnet video after of the handshake line. They didn't mention Chara at all. So for Doc to do that was definitely notable. Maybe he was just watching Chara, because I think, Chara's gotten criticized for like 6 years now for being too slow or old or whatever. And really he hasn't been. But in the bubble, he just wasn't – he didn't have his legs. And I don't know if that's not skating for 3 months. Like, we know how hard he works. I'm sure he did all the squats and one-legged jumps and hurdles and everything from, April through July. But maybe at 43, to keep your skating legs fresh, you need to skate. And I don't know that he had access to a rink. I feel like most guys didn't. I don't know if they had connects somehow. I don't know. It looks like his skating legs, sort of faded in that stretch. Probably the longest stretch he hasn't skated in his life. Dating back to his tiny tot years, and he wasn't there. So maybe Emmerich was reading the play on the ice and seeing a Chara who couldn't keep up and was not nearly the impact player that he's been. Or maybe there was a little something. But, I mean, the man is 43. He's logged as many minutes as a human being can log. I think he's averaged, 22 minutes a game for the last 14 years. And for him to walk away, it's not like the Bruins or Chara got shortchanged in that relationship. So if it is over, it's not the worst thing, just because you can't really – I mean, we saw it with Tom Brady and the Patriots. It's like, how long can this last? Like, at a certain point, everything has to end. And 43 years old in the NHL as an all-situations defenseman, it's pretty good.
Pretty good. Now, I will say – it's so funny because it feels like he's done, given the broadcast, given the climate in the post-game Zoom.
Let me throw one more thing in there at you. Is like, what is next year? Like, what is the 2020-2021 season?
So that's my next point. This is the perfect time to retire if you're Chara. You're 43. You have a cup. You've done everything you could do. We're in a pandemic. Next season's sort of uncertain. Is it going to start November 17th, or is it going to be a lot longer? It feels like it's going to probably not start then, if I had to guess. So now would make the most sense to leave. But when you think of Chara's not like me or you or any normal person. He's not normal. He's a freak. Like, this is this kind of situation where Chara would be like, I want to play through this. I want to work out through this and do those one-legged squats and all that stuff. So it feels like Chara's any other player, I think, would say, you know what, now's the time to retire. Like your average Joe veteran would say, you know what, now's the time to leave. I feel like there's still something in him that makes him want to play more. Now, granted, maybe being in the bubble for this long in the middle of a pandemic makes him think, you know what, maybe it's time to go home. He doesn't have Giselle at home telling him that he has to quit. So, who knows with that. But
Are you reporting that?
I'm reporting Giselle is not at Zdeno Chara's house.
Okay,
correct.
I just wanted to make sure.
Giselle has not been pushing Zdeno to get off the plant-based diet and to come home and take care of the kids. She has not done that to Zdeno Chara.
Okay.
That would be so. She's only hurt one Boston athlete to get out of here. But the Chara stuff, it's so tough to tell, but it does feel like it's over. And I think that this veteran group, and you saw it last night or on Monday night with Krejci, they know this is coming to an end soon. They know that, Chara might be done. Krug is probably walking in free agency. Tuukka Rask could be done. And he has 1 year left on his deal. Krejci has a year left on his deal. Bergeron has 2 years left. This veteran core is dissipating quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Krug is obviously a loss, but that's still, he's always been a specialist, so to speak, which is, an offensive defenseman. He's a weapon. He's been a great Bruin. He's been a great leader behind the scenes with the young players. Like, he is very important, but it's not necessarily, like, when I think of the core, I think of Bergeron, Chara.
Oh,
Krejci,
yeah.
Marchand. Even Marchand, because, like, that's how far back you can go. Like, 10 years is a pretty decent chunk, and Tuukka being a part of that as well. So I really think it's just more like a look and identity with Chara than it is the play, though, don't you? He was good. He was fine this year. It's not like he was a liability. He didn't look the same in the bubble. His legs weren't there, like I mentioned. But working with McAvoy as a top pair, like, that was – it's still difficult to go against top lines in the NHL, and Chara could still do it. So you would miss that, and especially at – what did he make, $2 million this year? That would be a big loss.
1.5 or 2.
I think it was 2 with like 1.75 in incentives. I don't know what those details were, but it was cheap money for a guy that still logged 19 plus minutes, worked well with McAvoy. Like, that was a valuable. So I think Chara is still the bigger one there for me. The two centermen, like, they'll still be there. Poor Krejci could use a couple wingers. It's
We've been saying this for years now. It's
sad. You go back to the top line stretch there where he had Lucic and Horton, then he had Lucic and Iginla for like the one run. He had who's his right wing when they went to the 13 finals? I'm blanking. It obviously wasn't Iginla because it
was Horton.
Jágr. Did he have Jágr?
No, Horton was in the 2013 run.
Oh yeah, got hurt. He was hurt in 12. He was there in 13.
Yes.
Anyways, point is, they were the top line. They were buzzing. Then all of a sudden, Pastrnak comes on the scene, and Krejci just has to sit there and sort of get whoever is left. But I think those guys, you still have a couple years. I honestly think for the Bruins to look like they looked, and I know you don't agree that they were the best team in hockey this year because the Lightning were better, but for them to come back and just have that dedication and focus after a Game 7 Cup final loss was wildly impressive. And I think, we speak about cliches and like tired sports terms like character and everything like that, but like, that takes serious character to come back. I compare it, not to do a heavy Patriots Bruins podcast here, but I compare it to the Patriots coming back from the Malcolm Butler game and winning a Super Bowl the next year. Like, that doesn't happen. Teams are usually devastated for at least a year before they sort of build back toward. It's like when your heart gets broken, Evan, and you're afraid to love again. I'm not looking for dating right now. I'm just looking to go out and enjoy myself. That's what teams are like after they lose Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. But the Bruins didn't mess around this year. Like, that's the biggest loss of the whole NHL being stopped situation, is they really were buzzsawing. And like you mentioned earlier, I would have given them a better chance. So that's why Krejci was so sad last night, to bring it back to the core, is because he's like, he knew it. Marchand knew it. Marchand was like, man, I thought we were going to go all the way, because they were that team. They just weren't once it restarted. And that's a bummer. There's bigger things during COVID than the Bruins losing their momentum and confidence and skill and everything. But it's undeniable that the team that showed up in Toronto wasn't the same team.
No, there isn't anything bigger. That is the biggest.
You're right. That's number one. And then it's just like,
death. But at first is the death of the Bruins' momentum last season. Next is like 100,000 people died.
You said it, not me.
I do think what you said was so interesting, though, in the sense that. Yeah, exactly. I think it's so interesting, though, when you say that it is incredible how focused they were. You remember, like, they started out the year really well. They had a little rough stretch in November, but they carried it through December, and they just were so hot through the entire season after that terrible, devastating, no good, horrible, very bad Game 7. And I think that is something to celebrate, and that is something to look back on fondly when it comes to this team. Even though they didn't meet their expectations, the fact they kind of – you remember this. When they lost Game 7, And that was devastating. They lost it in Boston. No one wanted to discuss the Bruins for the entire summer. People wanted to forget that it ever happened. And they came back in the fall and made themselves watchable again and made people kind of believe in them again. That, hey, you know what, this team's all right. Now, it's been a tough ending, and so be it. And I agree they were not the best team in hockey, at least on paper and on the ice-wise. But that is very true what you said. They did make themselves watchable again, and they were a special team. The other thing that I wanted to hit on was you mentioned Chara leaving being bigger, not for his play, but for his leadership and character and all that stuff. And I agree for the most part. But let's say Chara and Krug do both leave. What do you have on the left side on defense? You have Grzelcyk, you have Lauzon, you have John Moore, you have maybe Jacob
John
Zamora.
Moore for like 10 years, right?
Yeah, you have John Moore for the rest of eternity. But that, like, you don't have a number one left shot defenseman. Like, to me, Grzelcyk is not ready to do that.
Doesn't it seem like they've kept Grzelcyk along as like Krug light in the event that he eventually leaves? But we know, I mean, Grzelcyk's an incredible skater and a good puck mover. But I mean, Krug's shot and vision on the power play and just in general is a rare thing. I think we can agree.
Yes.
It's not a knock to say Grzelcyk isn't Krug, because Krug's skill in that area. He's like, what's his name? Are you an Avengers fan?
I'm not.
He's like the arrow guy. He's like Hawkeye, you know?
Hawkeye, yes.
Anyone can shoot an arrow, but Hawkeye is good at it. Like, that's Krug's shot. Like, as good as Grzelcyk is as an offensive, I mean, I think he's like a figure skater out there. Marvelous to watch skate, but it's a rare thing what Krug has, and you definitely will be missing that.
Well, I think they're very different players, and they get kind of lumped together because they're both tiny, and they're both.
Well, because like when Krug's out, Grzelcyk fills in on the power play. It's like
exactly.
Like not the same.
It isn't. Like, to me, Grzelcyk is a guy who's great at zone exits, zone entries, all that stuff. Krug is just an offensive dynamo. Like, there's points and incredible passes and, as you said, great shots and great rushes, whereas Grzelcyk's kind of a finesse, get through the offensive zone, get through the neutral zone into the offensive zone type guy. But I don't think, if Chara goes, and also Vakanainen as well could maybe step in there, but he hasn't had enough experience yet to really warrant top 4 minutes. So you look at that.
Because the hockey gods want you to have to write Urho, Vakanainen, and Matt Grzelcyk as much as possible.
That's what's unfortunate. I got Grzelcyk down this year.
I had it, and then I lost
it. Yes,
I lost it during the break. I've struggled during the bubble to write Grzelcyk, and I'm like, I had this for a solid year, and it's gone. It's a damn shame.
It's a shame. That might have been the worst part of COVID, was forgetting how to spell Matt Grzelcyk.
One, forgetting how to spell Matt Grzelcyk. 2, the Bruins losing momentum. Like, this is a groundbreaking podcast. No, but you definitely lose it there. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm looking at free agents or trades or anything like that. They don't really have. I don't know what they have to make a trade to get a top pairing defenseman. I don't think anyone has that kind of stash these days. I guess the offshoot. This has nothing to do with their left shot defenseman, but the offshoot is Patrice Bergeron would get to wear the C, which has been like, on any other team in any other universe, he's been wearing the C for a decade, and it would be, it looked cool on him.
It would look cool on him.
Yeah, like that.
He's done a lot to earn it.
Yeah, I know back in like 2010 and 2011, everyone wanted to strip the C off of the most dependable, durable defenseman, in the game. But this would be a more natural way to hand it over. Maybe even if Chara comes back, he should give it over. That would be cool. Maybe have a little ceremony, like
instead of like when Bork let Esposito took the jersey off, you'll have Chara come out,
boom,
right off the jersey, put it on, like just stick it right on Bergeron's thing,
yeah.
And then he'll just retire and leave the ice and wave goodbye.
I have completely derailed your point, but like that's what I do. Like, I do my thing.
That's okay.
I'm thinking about Velcro C's at this point, but
that's innovative though.
Yeah. To your point, I think people here, and it's not like a knock or an insult or anything. People take things for granted when you have it for so long, and that's elite goaltending, and that's the defensive play of Chara. Because, like I said, he's still going up against top lines. He's still neutralizing some of the best threats in the game, and I'm not saying he did that in the bubble, because he didn't. It's not something you can just hit a button and push someone up from the second pairing or third pairing and it works out. It's really hard to do. It looks easy when someone does it for so long, looking, like they're not trying, which Chara has because he's humongous and very talented and knows what he's doing.
He doesn't even go into corners anymore.
He doesn't have to. He knows
exactly.
He knows how it's coming out. But yeah, definitely. I think the flip side of that is, you could say going into corners. He didn't retrieve pucks as well. The zone exits were more difficult, I think, when he was going to get it because guys were catching up to him. Forechecks were getting on him. Pucks weren't getting out. So I think maybe the flip side is that maybe it does improve your 5-on-5 offense a little bit if you get the right guy in there. But there's no – I think the Bruins are ultimately better if Zdeno Chara comes back and is Zdeno Chara next year. But with all the uncertainty, I don't know that there's probably not going to be a preseason. There's probably not going to be all that. It's going to be weird and it's going to be hard. So I wouldn't be surprised if life without Chara begins whenever and however next season starts.
I would agree with you, Michael. Before you go, is there anything you would like to plug?
Oh boy. No, nothing.
Nothing.
I've never done anything worthwhile. I mean,
it's okay.
I would, I'm on Twitter. You can check that out if you want. It's Michael F. Hurley. The F is for failure. It's not for everyone though, so I'll say that straight up. But the good news, I guess, if there is a good thing, is from a Boston sports perspective, the train keeps rolling. The Celtics look the opposite of the Bruins in their bubble. They look like unbeatable in their bubble, and that will carry us right into football season, which is somehow happening. If you ask me in July, like that had a 0.0% chance. I was like, they're going to try it. They're going to open camps. Everyone's going to get sick, and then they're going to have to shut it down. I don't know how they're pulling it off so far, but it looks like it's going to happen better than baseball. I think baseball was like the sacrificial lamb in the non-bubble professional sports, and
it was.
Football's taking it seriously. I think they take their money seriously in that league, so they've really locked down. So football season is a very interesting prospect, so we'll be covering that extensively. Unfortunately, I was ready for a long Bruins run. I know you were as well. I think everyone was. It's you had to face Tampa, like you said. You had to face Tampa at some point, and whether maybe if they win Game 2 in overtime, it's a whole different shape.
Whole different series.
I would encourage people to not get overly down on the Bruins and say they're hopeless and they were miles apart from the Lightning, because the end result looks like they were. But when you have 2 overtime games, a bounce off a shin pad, it's a whole different thing, and that's how hockey works sometimes. I think it's disappointing they didn't get farther, but the fact that they got where they did and still have enough pieces to do it again, they'll remain relevant and interesting, which is something I didn't guarantee for this year, like we talked about earlier.
Another season, another year of no Bruins hockey getting to September. What a disappointment this franchise has been for so many years.
Did it get to September, though? How late did the game – it ended before – that was a 7 o'clock start, yeah. It almost got to September, though.
So close. And in hockey, it's like when the 2001 when the Yankees played in November, Derek Jeter got Mr. November. You could deem like Andre Palat Mr. August. That'll be like his nickname forever.
Mr. As you said that, Palat just got another grade A chance against Halak and didn't score somehow.
Didn't score, but he hit like a random tip. It went 70 feet up in the air, went back in.
Now I'm rambling, but when that goal went in, I'm like, people gamble on this sport? Like, are you kidding me? You put your hard-earned money on this sport?
That is what I say. Hockey is the worst sport to gamble on because it's like Bruins deserve to win that game. They lost.
It's like pinball. Like, yeah, I'm going to gamble on this pinball game.
It absolutely is. Michael, thank you for joining. As always, we'll have you on next year when the Bruins maybe win the Stanley Cup, don't make the playoffs, lose in the playoffs. But again, thank you for joining. And for CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.